The grand ballroom of the Westbrook Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the quiet murmur of Seattle's legal elite. Sarah Chen stood in the marble bathroom, her emerald green dress reflecting in the oversized mirrors as her trembling fingers clutched her phone. The screen displayed an email thread that threatened to destroy everything her father had built, and everything she had believed for the past 3 years. Sarah, they're about to present the award. Jessica, her father's legal assistant, called through the bathroom door. Your father's looking for you. Just a minute. Sarah's voice cracked as she forwarded the emails to her private account. The timestamp on the original messages made her stomach churn. October 15th, 2021, 3 days before her mother allegedly had her drug-induced breakdown at Sarah's 13th birthday party. The bathroom's soft lighting couldn't hide the pallor of her face as she studied her reflection. At 16, she had mastered the art of composure, a skill learned from watching Michael Chen, Seattle's most celebrated defense attorney, and her father, work his magic in courtrooms. But tonight, that composure was slipping. Through the bathroom's thick doors, the sound of applause rippled. The ceremony was beginning. Sarah smoothed her dress, practiced her camera-ready smile, another skill inherited from her father, and stepped into the corridor. The hotel's plush carpeting muffled her heels as she hurried toward the ballroom. There you are. Michael Chen's familiar voice carried the warm authority that had convinced countless juries. He stood at the ballroom entrance, handsome in his tailored tuxedo, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled. Everything okay, sweetheart? Sarah felt the weight of the phone in her clutch, heavy with secrets. Just nervous about the speech, she lied, the words tasting bitter. Her father's smile widened as he adjusted his Attorney of the Year nominee pin. He'll do great introducing me. Remember what I always say about public speaking. Control the narrative, control the room, Sarah recited, the irony of his favorite phrase not lost on her. How many times had he controlled narratives, twisted truths, destroyed lives? The emails proved he had orchestrated her mother's downfall with surgical precision. Inside the ballroom, Seattle's legal community had gathered to celebrate excellence in law. Judges, attorneys, and activists filled the tables, many of them familiar faces from years of legal functions. At their designated table, Sarah recognized some of her father's closest allies, the same people who had testified about her mother's unstable behavior during the custody battle. And now, the MC's voice boomed through the speakers. To introduce our Attorney of the Year nominee, Michael Chen, please welcome his daughter, Sarah Chen. The spotlight found her as she approached the podium. 300 faces turned toward her, expecting the usual heartwarming father-daughter moment. Sarah's prepared speech cards felt like lead in her hands. Every word she had written now read like a tribute to deception. My father, she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart, has dedicated his life to justice. The irony threatened to choke her. In her mind, the emails flashed again, detailed instructions to a private investigator to plant evidence, communications with paid witnesses, careful plans to manipulate her mother's medical records. As Sarah continued her speech, praising her father's commitment to truth and integrity, she watched him beam with pride from his seat. But behind her practiced smile and polished words, a decision was crystallizing. The daughter of Michael Chen knew better than anyone. The truth had a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply it was buried. Tonight, she would play her part. Tomorrow, she would begin gathering evidence. The real trial, the one that would tear her family apart but finally bring justice, was about to begin. Sarah's bedroom had become a war room. 3 weeks after the awards ceremony, her laptop glowed in the darkness as she reviewed the security footage for the 100th time. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m., October 16th, 2021, what her father had called the night of Elena's breakdown. The grainy video showed Michael Chen entering her mother's home office, his movements deliberate and calculated. Sarah leaned closer, watching him place items in her mother's desk drawer, prescription bottles, carefully positioned to look hastily hidden. The same bottles that would be discovered during the surprise home inspection he had anonymously requested. I was there that night, Sarah whispered to herself, the memory shifting like sand beneath her feet. She had sworn in court that she'd seen her mother stumbling, dropping pills, behaving erratically. But now, reviewing the footage, she realized she'd only seen the aftermath, the carefully staged scene her father had created. The video continued, showing Michael making a phone call. Sarah had enhanced the audio using software borrowed from the school's AV club. Her father's voice came through clearly. "Everything's set. When the inspector arrives tomorrow, make sure to direct them to the office first. Elena won't be able to explain away what they find." Nausea rose in Sarah's throat. She minimized the video and opened her digital journal, a detailed timeline she'd been constructing. Each entry represented another piece of the puzzle. October 12, 2021. Dad's first meeting with Dr. Harrison, the psychiatrist who later testified about Mom's addiction. October 14, 2021. Security system maintenance, when he must have installed the hidden cameras. October 15, 2021. Mom's art therapy session, her last normal day. October 16, 2021. The staged evidence. October 17, 2021. The surprise inspection. A soft knock at her door made Sarah jump. "Sarah, you're still up?" Her father's voice carried concern. "Just finishing homework." She called back, quickly closing the laptop. "Big test tomorrow. Don't stay up too late, sweetheart. Love you." "Love you too, Dad." The words felt like glass in her mouth. Once his footsteps faded, Sarah pulled out her mother's old sketchbook from under her mattress. She'd found it in the attic last week, hidden inside a box marked Dalmatians. The pages were filled with vibrant drawings, art therapy exercises dated just days before the alleged breakdown. One particular sketch caught her attention: a woman surrounded by shadowy figures, their hands reaching for her. In the corner, Elena had written, "Something feels wrong. Michael's been acting strange. If anything happens to me." The entry ended abruptly. Sarah opened her laptop again, this time pulling up court transcripts she'd secretly copied from her father's home office. Her own testimony stood out in harsh black and white. "Yes, Your Honor. I saw my mother acting erratically. She wasn't herself. I was scared." Reading it now, Sarah could hear the fear in her 13-year-old voice, fear her father had carefully cultivated. He had spent weeks before the incident telling her stories about her mother's concerning behavior, planting seeds of doubt that would bloom into convincing testimony. A new email notification popped up on her screen. Her hands shook as she opened it. A response from her mother's former best friend, Claire Martinez. "Sarah, I've been waiting 3 years for someone to ask these questions. What happened to your mother wasn't right. I have documents you need to see, but be careful, your father has powerful friends. Meet me tomorrow at the Bluestone Cafe. Come alone." Sarah glanced at her bedroom door, thinking of her father sleeping down the hall, still believing his secrets were safely buried. She typed a quick response: "I'll be there, 4 p.m. The truth about her mother's addiction was just the beginning. Something told Sarah that tomorrow's meeting would reveal even darker lies lurking beneath the surface of her father's perfect reputation. "Tell me about this photo, Grandma Rose," Sarah said, holding up a faded picture of her mother standing in front of a small art gallery. Her grandmother's living room smelled of Earl Grey tea and lavender, a comforting contrast to the tension building in her chest. This was more than a school photography project now, it was her chance to uncover the truth about her mother's past. Rose Martinez's hands trembled slightly as she took the photograph. This was Elena's first exhibition, 2 months before. Her voice trailed off, eyes clouding with memories. "Before the baby." "Baby?" Sarah's heart skipped. "What baby?" Rose looked startled and sad. "Oh dear. He never told you, did he? Your mother was 4 months pregnant when she lost the baby. That's what triggered everything, not drugs, not instability. Just unbearable grief that your father couldn't understand or accept." Sarah's camera slipped from her fingers onto the plush carpet. A sibling. She'd almost had a sibling. "When?" she whispered. "September 2021. Elena threw herself into art therapy afterward. The paintings helped her process the loss. But Michael," Rose stood slowly, moving to an antique secretary desk in the corner. "He called it wasteful emotional indulgence, said she needed to get over it and be strong for you. When she refused to return to normal on his timeline, he began building his case. Sarah watched her grandmother unlock a hidden drawer, extracting a thick manila envelope. "I've kept these safe, waiting for the right time. Elena made me promise to share them when you were old enough to understand." Inside the envelope, Sarah found hospital records, grief counseling sessions, and a small USB drive. Her hands shook as she inserted it into her laptop. Dozens of files populated the screen: financial records, emails, video clips. One folder was labeled simply "Truth." The first video showed her mother in an art therapy session, paint-stained hands creating a haunting image of an empty cradle. "I'm worried about Michael." Elena's voice was clear, steady. "He's been moving money around, meeting with people late at night. When I asked about the new accounts, he got angry, said I was being paranoid." Sarah opened the financial records. Wire transfers to multiple offshore accounts, all dated within weeks of her mother's miscarriage. Large sums paid to names she recognized from the custody hearing, expert witnesses, character references, even the court-appointed psychiatrist who had diagnosed Elena with delusional tendencies. "Your father was thorough," Rose said quietly, watching Sarah's face. "He knew exactly how much pressure to apply, which strings to pull." By the time Elena realized what was happening, it was too late. Her grief had already been weaponized against her. A notification popped up on Sarah's phone, a text from her father. "Where are you? Dinner's getting cold." "I have to go," Sarah said, quickly gathering the evidence. But Rose caught her arm. "Wait, there's one more thing you need to see." She retrieved a small key from her necklace and opened a cabinet, pulling out a pristine canvas still wrapped in protective paper. Elena finished this the day before the custody hearing. She never got to show it in court. Sarah carefully unwrapped the painting. It showed two figures, a mother and daughter, separated by a wall of darkness. But where the wall cracked, light poured through. At the bottom, in her mother's distinctive handwriting, "Truth breaks through even the strongest barriers. For Sarah, when you're ready to see." Thunder rumbled outside as Sarah stared at the painting, her mother's prophecy come to life. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from her father, more insistent this time. "Take it," Rose urged, rewrapping the canvas. "Along with everything else." But Sarah, her grandmother's eyes were intense. "Be careful. Your father didn't just build a case against Elena. He built a fortress of lies, and fortresses like that, they're guarded day and night." Sarah hugged her grandmother, the weight of evidence heavy in her bag. As she drove home through the rain, Elena's painted prophecy burned in her mind. The wall of darkness was beginning to crack, but would the light of truth be enough to break through 3 years of carefully constructed lies? Sarah's perfect facade began crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. Her advanced placement chemistry test sat on her desk, the red D+ burning into her retinas. 3 weeks had passed since her visit to Grandma Rose, and the weight of secrets was taking its toll. "Miss Chen." Mr. Rodriguez's voice cut through her thoughts. "Please stay after class." The chemistry lab emptied, leaving Sarah alone with her teacher. She could feel her phone vibrating, probably her father, checking why she wasn't responding to his texts about her grades dropping. "This isn't like you," Mr. Rodriguez said, tapping the test paper. "You're one of my best students. Is everything all right at home?" Home. The word felt like a joke now. Home had become a surveillance operation. Every dinner conversation was a recording opportunity, her phone constantly running a voice memo app, catching her father in small lies that formed a larger pattern. "I'm fine," Sarah started to say, but her voice cracked. Tears she'd been holding back for weeks threatened to spill. Mr. Rodriguez pulled up a chair. "Sarah, as your academic advisor, I need to tell you that Harvard's early admission looks at junior year grades. As someone who's known you since freshman year, I need to ask, what's really going on?" The irony wasn't lost on her. Harvard Law, her father's alma mater, his dream for her future. The same dream he'd used to manipulate her mother. "Elena's art hobby won't pay for Harvard," he'd said in court, positioning himself as the only parent capable of securing Sarah's future. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Claire Martinez, her mother's former friend. "URGNT, your father just filed new papers. He's moving to block any future custody appeals. Meeting scheduled with Judge Harrison tomorrow." Sarah's hands began to shake. "Mr. Rodriguez, if you knew something." something that could hurt people you love. But the truth was more important. She didn't finish the sentence. Through the lab windows, she saw her father's Tesla pulling into the school parking lot. He'd been doing this lately, showing up unannounced, claiming father-daughter lunch dates, while interrogating her about her declining performance. "Truth has a cost," Mr. Rodriguez said quietly, following her gaze. "But lies? Lies have interest rates." Sarah gathered her things quickly, her mind racing. Her father couldn't see her like this. He'd know something was wrong. 3 years as Seattle's top defense attorney had made him an expert at reading people. She'd watched him destroy witnesses on the stand by spotting the smallest signs of deception. "I have to go," she mumbled, hurrying toward the door. But Mr. Rodriguez's next words stopped her cold. "You know, I knew your mother. She taught art at the community center where my wife works. Before everything." Sarah turned slowly. "Did you testify? At the custody hearing? Your father asked me to. Wanted me to say Elena was unstable, that her behavior affected your schoolwork." He met Sarah's eyes steadily. "I refused. Next semester I was denied tenure. Had to start over at a new school." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. How far had her father's influence reached? How many lives had he ruined to maintain control? Her phone lit up with another text, this time from an unknown number. "I was your mother's nurse after the miscarriage. I have proof of records tampering. Meet me at Sacred Heart Hospital, 4 p.m. Sarah stared at the message, her heart pounding. More evidence, more witnesses, but also more risk. Her father's words from breakfast echoed in her mind. "Remember, sweetheart, the Chen family protects its own, no matter what." Was she ready to sacrifice that protection, to become the very thing her father fought against in court every day, a hostile witness? Through the window, she watched him step out of his Tesla, straightening his tie. The same tie he'd worn to court 3 years ago, his lucky tie. The one he'd worn the day he'd torn her family apart. Sarah touched her mother's painting, carefully hidden in her backpack. "The truth breaks through," she whispered, "even the strongest barriers." The Healing Hearts Gallery buzzed with the quiet energy of a Friday evening exhibition. Sarah stood before a massive canvas titled Fractured Reflections, her heart thundering in her chest. The painting showed a woman piecing together shards of a broken mirror, each fragment reflecting a different memory. She recognized her mother's style immediately, the bold brushstrokes, the haunting use of light and shadow. "It's about trauma," a soft voice said behind her. "How we rebuild ourselves from the pieces others leave behind." Sarah turned slowly, coming face to face with Elena Chen for the first time in 3 years. Her mother looked different than in her memories, stronger, steadier, her dark hair now streaked with elegant silver. She wore a paint-stained apron over a simple black dress, a name tag identifying her as Elena Martinez, artist and art therapist. "Mom," Sarah whispered, the word feeling foreign on her tongue. Elena's professional composure cracked slightly. "Sarah, how did you find me?" "Your blog. The paintings. I'd know your work anywhere." Sarah's voice trembled. "We need to talk. About Dad. About everything." Elena glanced around the crowded gallery, then gestured toward a door marked Studio. Inside, the space smelled of oil paints and turpentine. Canvases lined the walls, 3 years of emotion captured in color and texture. "I've imagined this moment so many times," Elena said, closing the door. "But I never thought that I'd discover the truth." Sarah pulled out her phone, bringing up the evidence she'd gathered. About the miscarriage, the fabricated addiction. Everything. Elena sank into a paint-splattered chair, her hands shaking. "You know about the baby. Grandma Rose told me. She showed me the hospital records, the therapy sessions." Sarah's voice caught. "Why didn't you fight harder? Why did you let him win?" "Fight harder?" Elena's laugh was hollow. "Sarah, I fought with everything I had. But your father, he didn't just attack me in court. He systematically destroyed every support system I had. Friends, colleagues, my art therapy practice. Everything I'd built disappeared overnight." Sarah thought of Mr. Rodriguez, of Claire Martinez, of all the lives her father had touched with his poison. He's still doing it. He's filing new papers to prevent any future custody appeals. Of course he is. Elena stood, moving to a covered canvas in the corner. That's why I started documenting everything, every threat, every manipulated piece of evidence. She pulled back the sheet, revealing a timeline painted across the canvas, dates, events, names, all woven into a haunting visual narrative. The gallery owner thinks it's an abstract piece about healing from domestic abuse, Elena explained, but it's really a record. Evidence hidden in plain sight where your father's influence couldn't reach. Sarah studied the painting, recognizing dates that matched her own investigation. You knew someone would eventually discover the truth. I hoped it would be you. Elena touched the canvas gently. You have his analytical mind, but my ability to see beneath the surface. I knew if anyone could unravel his lies, it would be you. A notification lit up Sarah's phone, her father's law firm announcing his latest victory. Michael Chen wins landmark case. Justice prevails. Justice, Sarah scoffed, showing her mother the screen. He's being honored at the State Bar Association next week. Another award for his integrity. Elena's eyes hardened with determination. Then that's where we make our stand. 3 years of evidence. Dozens of witnesses ready to come forward. We can expose everything. He'll destroy us, Sarah whispered. No, Elena said firmly, pulling her daughter into an embrace that bridged 3 years of absence. He already tried that. What he doesn't understand is that some things, once broken, come back stronger. Like this. She gestured to the gallery beyond the studio door, where her paintings told stories of survival and redemption. Are you ready? Elena asked softly. Once we start this, there's no going back. Sarah thought of her father's perfectly crafted lies, of all the lives he'd ruined to maintain his illusion of control. I'm ready. It's time for his last performance. The law firm's archive room smelled of dust and secrets. Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by case files, while Amber Wong, her father's new intern, nervously watched the door. These go back 10 years, Amber whispered, pulling another box from the shelf. Your father's early cases. Look for anything involving family court. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened a manila folder labeled Peterson v. Peterson, 2014. The pattern was identical. A mother stripped of custody through carefully orchestrated evidence, witness tampering, and character assassination. There's more, Amber said, her voice barely audible. Check the Thompson case from 2016, the Walker case from 2018. All mothers. All lost custody after challenging their ex-husbands, all represented by Michael Chen. A creak in the floorboard outside made both girls freeze. Footsteps approached, then passed. Sarah released her breath slowly, her heart pounding. Why are you helping me? She asked Amber. You could lose everything. Amber's eyes filled with tears. Because 7 years ago, my mother was the Jensen case. I was 12 when your father helped my dad take me away from her. I didn't understand then, but I do now. The weight of generational trauma settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Sarah thought of her mother's paintings, of all the broken lives hidden beneath her father's reputation for fighting for justice. Her phone vibrated, a text from Elena. Claire's ready to testify, so are 3 other witnesses. We move forward tomorrow. But before Sarah could respond, the archive room door swung open. Michael Chen filled the doorway, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the scattered files. Amber, you can go, he said quietly. The intern scrambled past him, shooting Sarah an apologetic look. Michael closed the door and loosened his tie, the lucky one, Sarah noticed. He always wore it before destroying someone's life. I wondered how long it would take you to find these, he said, picking up the Peterson file. You have your mother's curiosity, and my attention to detail. How many? Sarah's voice shook. How many families have you destroyed? Destroyed? Michael laughed softly. I protected my clients' interests, ensured their children were placed with the more stable parent. Like you protected me, Sarah stood, anger overtaking fear. By drugging Mom's tea before the custody hearing? By paying Dr. Harrison to diagnose her with addiction? Something dangerous flickered in Michael's eyes. I did what was necessary. Elena was weak. Her grief over the miscarriage would have destroyed your future. Harvard doesn't accept students raised by unstable artists. He moved to his briefcase, removing a thick envelope. Speaking of Harvard, I received your early admission package today. Full scholarship, conditional on maintaining your GPA. He placed it on the table between them. Of course, if certain allegations were to surface about your family, the university might reconsider. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Sarah thought of her mother's painting. Truth breaks through even the strongest barriers. That's your choice then? She asked, my silence for Harvard. That's my offer to protect you, Michael corrected. Elena's planning something. I have sources everywhere, Sarah. Tomorrow's little revelation at the Bar Association, it won't just destroy me. The scandal will follow you forever. Stanford, Yale, Columbia. All those law school dreams. Gone. Sarah's phone buzzed again. Elena. Everything's ready. Are you with us? Michael nodded at the phone. Time to decide, sweetheart, your future or your mother's vendetta. Choose wisely. Sarah looked at the Harvard envelope, then at the scattered case files. A decade of ruined lives, of justice perverted, of truth buried under her father's carefully constructed lies. Her decision crystallized like ice in her veins. Reaching for her phone, she typed 4 words that would change everything. I'm ready. Let's end this. The State Bar Association's hearing room hummed with tension. Sarah sat in the front row, her mother's hand gripping hers tightly as Michael Chen approached the podium. He looked impeccable in his charcoal suit, that lucky tie perfectly knotted at his throat. Members of the board, he began, his voice carrying that familiar warmth that had swayed countless juries. I stand before you today not just as an attorney, but as a father who has dedicated his life to protecting families. Sarah's free hand clutched the USB drive in her pocket. 3 years of lies were about to unravel in high-definition video. Judge Harrison, the same judge who had granted Michael custody 3 years ago, sat among the board members. His eyes narrowed slightly at Elena's presence in the room. Before we proceed with the award ceremony, a voice called out from the back, the board has received some concerning evidence that requires immediate attention. Claire Martinez strode down the center aisle, carrying a thick folder. Michael's smile didn't waver, but Sarah saw his fingers tighten on the podium. This is hardly the appropriate venue, he started, but Judge Harrison raised his hand. Given the severity of the allegations, Mr. Chen, we have no choice but to address them. The judge's voice carried a note of unease, particularly since they involve multiple cases over several years. Sarah stood, her heart thundering. I can speak to these allegations personally. Michael's mask slipped for a fraction of a second. Sarah, sweetheart, don't do this. Play the video, she said firmly to the technical assistant. The room's screens flickered to life, showing the security footage from her mother's home office. Michael Chen, caught in crystal-clear resolution, planting evidence. This is clearly doctored, Michael began, but Sarah wasn't finished. Amber Wong, she called out. The intern rose from her seat, clutching a stack of case files. Tell them about the Jensen case. About your mother. Objection, Michael's lawyer voice boomed. This is a coordinated attack on my character. No, Dad, Sarah cut in. This is justice. Something you taught me about, remember. She pulled out her phone, finger hovering over the play button. Should we listen to you coaching me before the custody hearing? Teaching your 13-year-old daughter how to lie under oath. The color drained from Michael's face as his own voice filled the room. Remember, sweetheart, just say you saw her taking pills. It doesn't matter if you didn't actually see it. Sometimes we have to help the truth along to get the right outcome. Alina stood next to Sarah, her artist portfolio in hand. The board should also see these, she said, removing her timeline paintings. Every case, every manipulated witness, every destroyed family, documented in plain sight. The room erupted in chaos. Board members leaned forward, examining evidence. Judge Harrison's face grew increasingly grave as more witnesses came forward. Dr. Harrison's nurse, confessing to falsified medical records, a court clerk admitting to backdated documents, 3 mothers from previous cases, all telling virtually identical stories. Michael Chen, the great defender, finally lost his composure. Everything I did was for you, he shouted at Sarah, to protect you from her weakness, her emotional instability. No. Sarah's voice rang clear and strong. It was for your control, your power, your reputation. The only weakness here was your inability to handle anyone challenging your perfect world. She turned to the board. My father taught me that justice prevails when the truth comes to light. He just never imagined the truth would be about him. Judge Harrison stood, his face ashen. Michael Chen, in light of this evidence, this board has no choice but to. I admit it. Michael's voice was barely a whisper. The room fell silent. I falsified evidence. In Elena's case, in others. I convinced myself it was justified, that I was protecting families, protecting my daughter. He looked at Sarah, seeing her clearly perhaps for the first time. But I destroyed them instead, including my own. The lucky tie hung loose around his neck as security officers approached. Sarah watched them lead her father away, feeling not triumph, but a complex mix of grief and relief. The truth had finally broken through the strongest barrier of all, her father's carefully constructed world of lies. 1 year later, Sarah stood at the podium of her high school graduation, her valedictorian speech cards trembling slightly in her hands. In the audience, Elena sat in the front row, beaming with pride. 10 rows back, Michael Chen sat in a pressed suit, flanked by 2 prison guards who had approved this temporary release to see his daughter graduate. Truth, Sarah began, her voice steady despite her racing heart, isn't just about facts, it's about courage. The courage to face reality, even when lies feel safer. Her eyes found her mother's, then drifted to her father's. Both had shaped her path to this moment, though not in ways anyone could have predicted. When I exposed my father's actions last year, many called it brave, but real bravery came after, in the rebuilding, the healing, the forgiveness that's harder than any accusation. The past year had been a whirlwind of change. Michael Chen's law license was permanently revoked. His cases were reviewed, resulting in dozens of custody arrangements being reopened and reevaluated. Elena's art therapy center, Truth Through Art, had become a haven for families healing from legal trauma. Some of you know that I turned down Harvard, Sarah continued, causing murmurs in the audience. Not because of scandal, as some suggested, but because I found a different calling. She thought of the acceptance letter from Berkeley School of Social Work, sitting on her desk at home. Next to it, a part-time position offer from her mother's center, working with children of divided families. My father taught me that justice comes through power. My mother showed me it comes through healing. I've learned it requires both, the strength to fight for what's right, and the compassion to help rebuild what's broken. In the prison's visiting room 2 months ago, Michael had finally asked the question that had haunted him. How did I not see what I was becoming? You saw what power could do, Sarah had answered, but forgot what it could destroy. Now, looking at him in the audience, she saw not the mighty attorney who had terrorized courtrooms, but a man struggling to reconstruct his own understanding of right and wrong. Yesterday, I visited the courthouse where everything changed, Sarah continued. The clerk gave me something remarkable, my father's lucky tie, held in evidence all this time. I'm wearing it today, not as a reminder of lies, but as proof that symbols can be reclaimed, their meanings transformed. The blue silk tie, now wrapped as a belt around her graduation robe, caught the light as she moved. This morning, I went to my mother's art gallery. The fractured reflections painting that helped me find her has been joined by a new piece. It shows not a woman piecing together broken mirrors, but a complete reflection, cracks and all, telling the story of survival. Elena wiped tears from her eyes, squeezing Claire Martinez's hand beside her. In the year since the hearing, their rekindled friendship had become a symbol of healing in itself. To my fellow graduates, I offer this truth. We are not defined by the lies we uncover, but by what we build in their place. My father will serve 5 more years for his crimes. My mother has helped dozens of families heal through art, and I'm learning that the greatest truth is this. Justice without compassion is just another form of power, but justice with healing, that's how we change the world. As applause filled the auditorium, Sarah saw her father being led away by the guards, but before he left, their eyes met. He nodded once, not in defeat, but in understanding. Some lessons come too late for redemption, but just in time for wisdom. Later, at the celebration dinner Elena had arranged, Sarah found herself surrounded by the unlikely family she'd built. Her mother, Grandma Rose, Claire, Amber Wong and her reunited mother, Mr. Rodriguez, and all the others who had chosen truth over power. On the restaurant wall, a new painting hung, Elena's graduation gift to her daughter. It showed a young woman standing at a crossroads, one path leading to towering courthouses, the other to a garden of healing. But the woman in the painting wasn't choosing either path. She was building a bridge between them. Your next chapter, Elena had written on the back. Where justice meets healing. Sarah touched the lucky tie at her waist, its silk smooth under her fingers. Some things break to destroy. Others break to transform. The trick was learning to tell the difference, and having the courage to rebuild either way.